Welcome back to the Sleepy Stoic Sanctuary, where ancient wisdom transforms the darkness of fear into the light of courage. Tonight, we journey with Perseus, not just the slayer of monsters, but the young man who learned that our greatest fears are often the gatekeepers to our greatest strengths. This is the story of facing the unconquerable, of turning terror into triumph, of discovering that what we most dread to confront often holds the key to who we were meant to become. In the ancient world, they said that to look upon the face of Medusa was to turn to stone, to become frozen forever in the moment of your greatest fear. But Perseus learned what the Stoics would later teach, that fear itself is not the enemy. The enemy is the paralysis that comes from running away from what we must face. This is more than a tale of gods and monsters. This is the blueprint for masculine courage, the kind that doesn't eliminate fear, but transforms it into focused action. The kind that doesn't avoid the impossible, but finds the strategy that makes the impossible inevitable. As you settle into your bed tonight, prepare to learn from a hero who discovered that the very thing that terrifies us most is often precisely what we need to claim our true power. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let this ancient wisdom guide you toward the sleep of heroes, the sleep of those who know that tomorrow's challenges are simply today's opportunities in disguise. Be calm, be clear, be dangerous. Tonight, we learn to face the Medusa within and without, and emerge transformed by the encounter. Take 3 deep breaths with me now. In through your nose, hold for a moment, and release slowly through your mouth. Feel your body beginning to settle into the comfort of your bed. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Release any tension you've been carrying from the day. Your jaw relaxes, your forehead smooths, and your eyes grow heavy with the approach of peaceful sleep. Starting from the crown of your head, imagine a warm, golden light beginning to flow down through your body. This is the light of ancient courage, the same light that guided Perseus through his darkest trials. Feel it flowing down your forehead, relaxing every muscle in your face. The golden light moves down your neck and shoulders, releasing all tension. Your arms grow heavy and relaxed, sinking deeper into the mattress. Your chest rises and falls in a natural, peaceful rhythm. Each breath brings you deeper into the tranquility of heroes at rest. Feel the warm light flowing down through your torso, relaxing your back, your abdomen, releasing any stress or worry you may have been holding. You are safe here, in this moment. You are protected by the courage of ages. The light continues down through your hips and thighs, warming every muscle, encouraging complete relaxation. Your legs grow heavy, sinking into the bed as if they're resting after a hero's journey. Down through your calves and feet, the golden light completes its journey, leaving you completely relaxed, completely at peace, completely ready to receive the ancient wisdom of courage and transformation. Your mind grows quiet and receptive, like the surface of a still lake reflecting the stars of ancient wisdom. Like Perseus standing at the edge of the unknown, gazing out over the wide dark sea toward his destiny. You are ready for whatever wisdom this ancient tale will bring to your dreams. Feel yourself supported by the strength of all the heroes who have come before you. Their courage flows through time itself, connecting you to a lineage of those who faced their greatest fears and emerged transformed. You are not alone in this moment. You are surrounded by the invisible presence of every brave soul who ever chose to move forward despite uncertainty. You are grounded in this moment, anchored to your bed like a ship safely moored in a peaceful harbor, yet open to the adventures that await in the realm of heroic courage. Your body rests completely, but your spirit is ready to soar alongside Perseus on wings of divine wisdom. You are safe here, protected by the very courage you are about to witness. You are calm, held in the embrace of ancient strength that has weathered every storm. You are ready to learn from the trials of heroes, knowing that their courage will become your courage. Their wisdom will become your wisdom. Their transformation will inspire your own. Let any remaining tension flow away from your mind like morning mist disappearing before the dawn. Your thoughts settle like leaves coming to rest after a gentle breeze. In this perfect stillness, you are ready to receive the greatest gifts that heroic stories can offer. The understanding that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act wisely in spite of fear. Take one more deep cleansing breath, and as you release it, feel yourself stepping across the threshold from the ordinary world into the realm of myth and legend, where Perseus awaits to show you what it truly means to transform terror into triumph. Breathe deeply and let the greatest story of courage ever told begin. In the ancient kingdom of Argos, there ruled a king named Perseus, a man whose greatest weakness was his need to control what the gods had already decreed. When the oracle of Delphi spoke her prophecy, her words struck terror into his heart. Your daughter's son will be your death. Danae was the most beautiful princess in all of Greece, and her father's most precious treasure. Rather than accept the wisdom of fate, Perseus chose to fight against it. He built a tower of bronze, impregnable and windowless, and there he imprisoned his daughter, believing that if no man could reach her, no grandson could ever be born to fulfill the prophecy. But the gods have their own ways of working their will. Zeus, king of the gods, had looked upon Danae with divine love, and neither bronze nor stone could stand against his determination. He came to her as a shower of golden light, flooding her prison with warmth and radiance that no mortal barrier could contain. From this union of mortal beauty and divine power, Perseus was conceived, a child destined for greatness, born from the very attempt to prevent that greatness from existing. This is the first lesson of courage, that what we try hardest to avoid often becomes the very path we are meant to walk. When Perseus discovered his daughter's pregnancy, his fear transformed him from protective father into tyrant. He could not bring himself to murder his own daughter and grandchild directly. Such an act would bring the Furies' wrath upon him. Instead, he chose a death that would appear to be the god's will rather than his own. Into a wooden chest, barely large enough to hold them both, he sealed Danae and her infant son. With tears that might have been grief or relief, he cast them upon the wine-dark sea, believing that the waves would accomplish what his conscience would not allow him to do directly. But Perseus was born under a divine star. What was meant to be their tomb became their salvation as Zeus guided the chest across the vast Mediterranean, toward an island where destiny waited to unfold its next chapter. On the island of Seriphos, an old fisherman named Dictys was drawing in his nets when he felt an unusual weight. Instead of fish, he found a chest containing a young woman and her baby, both miraculously alive after their impossible journey across the sea. Dictys was a man of simple virtue, the kind of unsung hero whose daily acts of kindness shape the destiny of the world. Without hesitation, he took Danae and Perseus into his humble home, asking no questions about their past, seeking no reward for his generosity. He raised Perseus as his own son, teaching him the fisherman's honest trade and the simple wisdom that comes from a life lived close to the sea. For 16 years, Perseus grew in strength and character on that peaceful island, never knowing that divine blood flowed through his veins, never suspecting that his true father was the king of the gods themselves. He learned to read the moods of the sea, to mend nets with patient skill, to find satisfaction in honest work and simple pleasures. Dictys taught him that true strength lies not in divine heritage, but in how we treat those who have less power than ourselves. Perseus learned compassion from watching his adoptive father care for the poor and sick of the island. He learned humility from the daily work of hauling nets and mending boats. Most importantly, he learned that heroism begins not with great deeds, but with the choice to help others, even when no one is watching. But the peaceful years could not last forever. Perseus was growing into a young man of remarkable beauty and strength, and his presence had not gone unnoticed by the island's ruler, King Polydectes. This petty tyrant had long desired Danae for his queen, but she had steadfastly refused his advances. Protected by the simple decency of Dictys and the growing strength of her son, Polydectes was not a man to accept refusal gracefully. He began to scheme, plotting how he might remove the obstacle of Perseus while claiming Danae for himself. The stage was being set for a confrontation that would transform a humble fisherman's adopted son into the greatest monster slayer in all of Greek legend. Perseus could feel the tension growing like a storm on the horizon, but he had no idea that his true test was about to begin. A test that would require not just physical courage, but the wisdom to know when to fight and when to think, when to trust in his own strength, and when to accept help from unexpected sources. The confrontation came during a great feast that Polydectes held in honor of his upcoming marriage, a marriage that existed only in his own ambitious mind. He had invited all the young men of the island to bring gifts worthy of a king's bride, knowing full well that Perseus, raised in a fisherman's poverty, would have nothing valuable to offer. When Perseus appeared at the feast empty-handed, Polydectes saw his opportunity to humiliate the young man who stood between him and his desires. "Tell me, son of Dictys," the king sneered, his voice dripping with false courtesy, "what gift have you brought to honor my bride? Surely a young man of your reputation has something magnificent to offer." The court laughed, but Perseus stood tall, meeting the king's gaze without flinching. In that moment, something awakened within him, not anger, but a deeper understanding of what this moment truly meant. This was not about gifts or marriage. This was about a powerful man using his position to prey upon those who could not defend themselves. "I have no gold to offer," Perseus said, his voice carrying a new authority that surprised even himself. "But I have something far more valuable, my word and the strength to back it up. Name any deed, any quest, any challenge, and I will accomplish it. But when I return successful, you will abandon your pursuit of my mother and leave this island forever." The king's eyes glittered with malicious triumph. Here was the opening he had been waiting for. There was one task that no mortal man could possibly accomplish. One quest that would rid him of Perseus forever, while appearing to honor the young man's brave words. "Very well," Polydectes said, his voice rising to address the entire court. "Since you speak so boldly of impossible deeds, bring me the head of Medusa the Gorgon. Return with that prize, and I will grant any request you make." Silence fell over the hall like a funeral shroud. Every person present knew what the king had just done. He had pronounced a death sentence disguised as a challenge. Medusa was one of the 3 Gorgon sisters, monsters so terrible that a single glance at their faces would turn any living creature to stone. Her lair was littered with the petrified remains of heroes who had attempted what Perseus now promised to achieve. But Perseus did not falter. Looking around at the faces of the court, some pitying, some eager for spectacle, some horrified at the king's cruelty, he nodded once. "I accept," he said simply. "Expect me when you see me, Your Majesty, and expect to keep your word." As Perseus walked from the hall, he felt the weight of every eye upon him. He had just committed himself to a task that had killed every hero who had attempted it. He had no plan, no strategy, no divine assistance that he knew of. All he had was his word, his courage, and a burning sense that some challenges must be faced regardless of the odds. What Perseus did not yet know was that his divine heritage was about to reveal itself, and that the gods themselves had been waiting for this moment to begin his true education in the arts of heroism. As Perseus walked alone along the shore that night, struggling with the magnitude of what he had promised, the air around him began to shimmer with otherworldly light. Two figures materialized from the darkness, beings of such beauty and power that he knew instantly he was in the presence of gods. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, appeared with her great shield gleaming like silver moonlight. Beside her stood Hermes, the messenger god, his winged sandals barely touching the sand. These were not distant, uncaring deities, but divine relatives who had been watching Perseus's development with growing interest. "My brave nephew," Athena said, her voice carrying the authority of perfect wisdom, "your mortal courage has earned you divine assistance. But know this, we will not fight your battle for you. We will only provide you with the tools and wisdom you need to fight it intelligently." Hermes stepped forward, his eternal smile touched with genuine affection. "The head of Medusa cannot be taken by strength alone, Perseus. Every hero who has tried the direct approach now stands frozen in her lair as a statue. You must succeed through strategy, through cunning, through wisdom applied at precisely the right moment." Athena held out her shield, its surface polished to perfect reflection. "This is my aegis. Use it not as a weapon, but as a mirror. Never look directly at Medusa. Her gaze will kill you instantly. But her reflection can be studied, her movements predicted, her weaknesses discovered." From Hermes came winged sandals that would allow Perseus to fly, and a sword forged in divine fire, sharp enough to cut through the Gorgon's armored neck. But the greatest gift was not these magical tools. It was the wisdom they represented. "Remember," Athena continued, "this quest will test not just your courage, but your intelligence. Every challenge you face will have a solution, but only if you think rather than simply react." The Stoics would later teach that the mind is the hero's greatest weapon, and you are about to learn why. Hermes gestured toward the dark horizon where Perseus's destiny awaited. "First, you must find the Gray Sisters, the Graeae. They alone know the location of Medusa's lair. They share one eye and one tooth among them, and they will not give up their secrets willingly. But if you are clever enough to steal their eye at the right moment, you can bargain for the information you need." Perseus knelt before his divine relatives, understanding that he was receiving more than weapons and tools. He was receiving a masterclass in strategic thinking from the goddess of wisdom herself. "I will not fail you," he promised. "Not through recklessness, not through pride, and not through despair. I will think first, Act second, and trust in the wisdom you have shared with me. Then you will succeed, Athena replied, because you understand what so many heroes have forgotten, that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the wisdom to act correctly in spite of fear. Your quest begins now, Perseus. May your mind be as sharp as your sword. As the gods faded back into the divine realm, Perseus found himself alone, but no longer helpless. He had divine tools, but more importantly, he had divine wisdom. The impossible had suddenly become merely very, very difficult, and that was a challenge he could work with. The Graeae dwelt in a cave at the edge of the world, where day and night met in eternal twilight. These three sisters had been ancient when the world was young, sharing between them one eye and one tooth, passing these precious possessions back and forth as they needed to see or eat. Perseus watched them for hours from the shadows, studying their patterns, learning their habits. This was his first real test of strategic thinking, not to rush in with sword drawn, but to understand his opponents and find the moment of opportunity. The sisters took turns using the eye to keep watch while the others rested. Perseus noticed that there was always a moment, just an instant, when the eye was being passed from one sister to another, when none of them could see. It was in that heartbeat of blindness that opportunity lay waiting. "Sister, pass me the eye," called the first Graeae. "I sense something moving in the shadows." As the eye was lifted from one socket and reached toward another, Perseus struck with the swiftness of Hermes himself. The eye disappeared from the sister's outstretched hand, and suddenly all three Graeae were blind. "The eye!" they shrieked in unison. "Where is our eye? Who dares steal from the daughters of Phorcys?" Perseus stepped into the light, holding their precious eye safely out of reach. "I am Perseus, son of Zeus, and I need information. Tell me where to find the island of the Gorgons, and your eye will be returned unharmed." The sisters hissed and threatened, but they were powerless without their sight. In the end, wisdom prevailed over anger, and they grudgingly revealed the location of Medusa's lair, a desolate island far to the west, where no bird flew and no fish swam, where the very air was thick with the fear of those who had gazed upon the Gorgon's face. As Perseus returned their eye and prepared to leave, the eldest sister spoke one final warning. "Beware, young hero. You are not the first to seek Medusa's head. The island is littered with the statues of those who thought divine gifts would be enough. Remember, she was once as beautiful as any goddess, transformed into a monster by cruel fate. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those who have nothing left to lose." Perseus nodded his thanks, understanding that he had just received wisdom worth more than gold. Medusa was not just a monster to be slain. She was a tragedy to be understood, and perhaps in that understanding he would find the key to his victory. The island of the Gorgons appeared on the horizon like a wound in the fabric of the world. No wind stirred its barren shore. No waves broke against its lifeless rocks. The very air seemed to hold its breath in the presence of such concentrated terror. As Perseus landed on the beach, his winged sandals barely whispering against the sand, He saw them, the statues, dozens upon dozens of stone warriors, each frozen in the exact moment they had first glimpsed Medusa's face. Some stood with swords raised, others had shields thrown up defensively, but all bore the same expression of absolute horror. These had been heroes once, men of courage and strength who had come here with this same quest Perseus now pursued. Their stone faces told the story of their final moments, the terrible realization that they had made a mistake from which there could be no recovery. Perseus moved carefully among them, using Athena's shield as a mirror to examine each statue without looking directly at them. Here was a warrior from Sparta, his bronze armor still gleaming after years of exposure. There stood an Amazon warrior, her bow still drawn, but her arrow forever unloosed. Each statue was a lesson in the price of failure. But rather than discouraging him, these silent teachers strengthened Perseus's resolve. He could see their mistakes now. Each had approached Medusa head-on, trusting in strength and speed rather than strategy. They had rushed into the confrontation with the courage of warriors, but without the wisdom of true heroes. The entrance to Medusa's lair yawned before him like the mouth of death itself. From within came no sound, not even the whisper of breathing. Yet Perseus knew she was there, waiting in the darkness with her two immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale, who would awaken the moment any intruder set foot in their domain. Perseus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every lesson he had learned. From Dictys, he had learned compassion and humility. From his confrontation with Polydectes, he had learned that sometimes we must stand up to overwhelming odds. From Athena and Hermes, he had learned that wisdom and preparation could overcome any obstacle. From the Graeae, he had learned patience and strategic thinking. Now it was time to learn the greatest lesson of all, that true courage is not about being unafraid, but about acting correctly in spite of fear. Every hero who had become a statue on this beach had possessed courage. What they had lacked was the understanding that some battles cannot be won through courage alone. Perseus adjusted Athena's shield on his arm, its polished surface reflecting the cave mouth perfectly. He drew the divine sword, feeling its perfect balance in his hand. Most importantly, he steadied his mind, preparing to face not just a monster, but the deepest fear that lived within his own heart. The fear that he might not be strong enough, clever enough, worthy enough to succeed where so many heroes had failed. "I go not just for myself," he whispered to the stone warriors around him, "but for all who have fallen before me, and for all who will come after. May their sacrifice guide my steps." And with that prayer, Perseus entered the lair of the Gorgons, stepping from the world of the living into the realm where fear itself had taken physical form. Inside the cave, Perseus moved like a shadow, every sense alert, but his eyes never looking anywhere but into Athena's polished shield. In its reflection, he could see the lair of the Gorgons, a chamber carved from living rock, where three forms lay sleeping among piles of golden treasure and scattered bones. Two of the sisters, Stheno and Euryale, were immortal beings of terrible beauty and power. But between them lay Medusa, the only mortal among the three, and therefore the only one who could be killed. Even in sleep, her presence radiated such malevolent power that Perseus felt his courage waver for a moment. She had been beautiful once, as the Gray Sister had warned him. Even transformed into a monster, traces of that divine beauty remained, making her all the more terrible. Her hair writhed with living serpents. Her skin had turned to bronze scales, and her eyes, though closed in sleep, promised death to any who gazed upon them. Perseus steadied himself, remembering Athena's words, "Think first, act second." He studied Medusa's position in the shield's reflection, calculating angles and distances. He would have only one chance. Once his sword struck, the other Gorgons would awaken, and their screams alone could drive a man insane. Step by careful step, still watching only the reflection, Perseus approached the sleeping monster. His divine sword felt weightless in his hand, blessed by the gods with the power to cut through anything. But the real weapon was his mind, the strategic thinking that had brought him this far and would see him through to the end. When he was close enough to strike, Perseus raised his sword high, still looking only into Athena's shield. In that moment, he understood something profound about courage. It was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act rightly despite fear. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to look directly at his target, to trust his eyes rather than a reflection. But wisdom prevailed over instinct. The sword descended in a perfect arc, guided by divine craft and human determination. It passed through Medusa's neck as easily as passing through water, and her head separated from her body in a fountain of golden ichor. Immediately, the cave erupted in chaos. Steno and Uriel awakened with screams that shook the very foundations of the island. But Perseus was already moving, snatching up Medusa's head and thrusting it into the magical bag Athena had provided, careful never to look upon it directly. From the blood of Medusa sprang Pegasus, the divine winged horse, and Chrysaor, the golden giant, children of her union with Poseidon before her transformation. As these miraculous births took place, Perseus activated Hermes' winged sandals and rose into the air, just as the other Gorgons launched themselves at where he had been standing. Flying faster than eagles, invisible in Hades' helm, Perseus escaped the island as the remaining Gorgons shrieked their fury to the uncaring sky. In his magical bag, he carried the head of Medusa, no longer a symbol of terror, but a tool of justice. Power transformed from destructive to protective. The impossible had been achieved not through strength, not through divine favor alone, but through the courage to think clearly in the face of overwhelming fear. Perseus had learned the most valuable lesson any hero can master, that our greatest powers often come to us precisely when we face what we thought would destroy us. On his journey home, Perseus encountered another scene of injustice that called to the heroic spirit now fully awakened within him. Flying over the kingdom of Ethiopia, he saw a sight that stopped him mid-flight. A beautiful princess chained to the rocks below, left as a sacrifice to appease a sea monster rising from the depths. This was Andromeda, daughter of King Cepheus and Queen Cassiopeia. Her mother's pride had brought divine wrath upon their kingdom. Cassiopeia had boasted that her daughter was more beautiful than the sea nymphs themselves, and Poseidon had sent a monster to ravage their shores in retaliation. Perseus descended like a bolt of divine lightning, landing before the terrified princess with Medusa's head safely hidden in his magical bag. "Fear not," he called to her, over the roar of the approaching monster. "I am Perseus, slayer of the Gorgon, and I will not let you die for another's pride." Andromeda looked upon him with wonder. Here was a young man radiating confidence and power, but more importantly, radiating the kind of goodness that makes power worth having. "You cannot defeat that creature," she warned. "It has devoured every warrior who has tried to face it." Perseus smiled, understanding now why the gods had given him such terrible power. It was not for his own glory, but for moments exactly like this, when strength could serve justice, when victory over his own fears could become the foundation for helping others overcome theirs. "Watch and learn what the head of Medusa can accomplish when wielded by righteousness rather than vengeance," he replied. As the sea monster burst from the waves, a creature of nightmare with rows of shark-like teeth and tentacles that could crush ships, Perseus unveiled Medusa's head. The monster's roar of triumph became a gurgle of shock as its flesh turned to stone, and it sank beneath the waves as a massive statue, never to threaten anyone again. Perseus freed Andromeda from her chains, and in that moment, he understood another profound truth about heroism, that our greatest victories are not the monsters we slay, but the people we save. Andromeda looked upon him not with the awe reserved for a slayer of monsters, but with the love given to a protector of the innocent. "Marry me," Perseus said, his words simple but carrying all the authority of a man who had faced his greatest fears and emerged transformed. "Not because I have saved you, but because I see in you the same courage that drove me to face the Gorgon. You faced your death with dignity, and that is the mark of a true hero." Their union was blessed by the gods themselves, for they recognized that Perseus had learned the final lesson of heroism, that power without love is tyranny, but love without power is helplessness. Only when the two are joined does true heroism emerge. Together, they flew toward Perseus's destiny, carried by Pegasus through skies that no longer seemed dangerous, but full of infinite possibility. The boy who had once been a fisherman's adopted son was now a hero in the truest sense, not because he had slain a monster, but because he had learned to transform fear into wisdom, wisdom into power, and power into service to others. When Perseus returned to Seriphos with his bride, he found the island in the grip of tyranny, worse than ever. In his absence, Polydectes had grown bold, believing the young hero would never return. He had forced Danae into hiding and terrorized all who had shown her kindness, including the good fisherman Dictys. The great hall where Perseus had first accepted the impossible quest now rang with the tyrant king's laughter as he celebrated what he believed to be his final victory. "The boy is dead," he proclaimed to his court. "Food for fishes and monuments to his own arrogance. Now none can stand between me and what I desire." It was then that Perseus strode into the hall, Andromeda at his side, carrying a cloth-wrapped bundle that seemed to pulse with contained power. "I have returned, Your Majesty," Perseus announced, his voice carrying new authority that made every man in the hall step back. "I come to fulfill my promise and claim what you swore to grant." Polydectes turned pale, but his arrogance would not let him show fear before his court. "Impossible," he sputtered. "No man can return from the Gorgon's Isle. You bring me tricks and lies." Perseus set his bundle carefully on the floor and began to unwrap it. "You demanded the head of Medusa," he said calmly. "I have brought you exactly what you asked for. But first, let me ensure that only you and your followers see this prize. All who serve justice rather than tyranny, close your eyes now and keep them closed until I give the word." Dectes and the other good people of the island immediately obeyed, but Polydectes and his corrupt courtiers laughed mockingly. "We will not be fooled by theatrics," the king declared. "Show us this supposed trophy of your imaginary victory." "As you wish," Perseus replied, and unveiled the head of Medusa. The effect was immediate and complete. Polydectes and every man who had supported his tyranny turned to stone in an instant, frozen forever in their moment of disbelief and scorn. The tyrant who had used his power to oppress the innocent became a statue in his own throne room. A permanent reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed, is never denied. When Perseus gave the all-clear, those who had closed their eyes opened them to find their oppressor gone and justice restored. Dectes, the humble fisherman who had shown kindness to strangers, was acclaimed as the new king of Seriphos, a ruler who would govern with the same compassion he had shown to a castaway mother and child 16 years before. Perseus had kept his word completely. He had brought the head of Medusa, and in doing so, he had freed his people from tyranny. But more than that, he had learned that true heroism is not about personal glory, but about using whatever power we gain to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Perseus offered Medusa's head to Athena, understanding that such terrible power should not remain in mortal hands. The goddess received it gratefully, placing it upon her aegis where it would serve to protect rather than destroy, to defend justice rather than spread terror. In that moment of offering, Perseus completed his transformation from frightened youth to true hero. He had learned that courage is not about being fearless, but about acting wisely despite fear. He had discovered that strength without wisdom is mere brutality, but wisdom without strength is powerless to help those in need. The prophecy that had driven his grandfather to such desperate measures finally came to pass, but not as Acrisius had feared. Years later, at an athletic competition, Perseus threw a discus that was caught by the wind and accidentally struck his grandfather, fulfilling the oracle's words. But there was no malice in it, no revenge, only the working out of fate that had always been beyond mortal control. Perseus ruled wisely and well, founding great cities and raising sons who would become heroes in their own right. But his greatest legacy was not his conquests or his treasures. It was the lesson he embodied for all who came after. He had learned what the Stoics would later teach, that our greatest enemies are often our own fears, our greatest weapons are our own minds, and our greatest victories come not from what we conquer, but from who we become in the process of facing what we thought would conquer us. From the terrified boy who had watched his mother's tears to the confident king who ruled with justice and wisdom, Perseus had become proof that any man can transform himself if he has the courage to face his deepest fears and the wisdom to learn from every challenge. His story reminds us that the monsters we must slay are not always external. Sometimes they live within our own hearts, wearing the face of our doubts, our fears, our certainty that we are not strong enough, not brave enough, not worthy enough to become the heroes our world needs us to be. But Perseus proved that with divine guidance, strategic thinking, and the courage to face what terrifies us most, any challenge can be overcome, any fear can be transformed into strength, and any ordinary person can become extraordinary. And so Perseus learned that true courage is not about being unafraid, but about facing our fears with wisdom, preparation, and the understanding that we are never alone in our battles. That the greatest victories are won not through strength alone, but through the wisdom to know when to fight, when to think, and when to accept help from sources beyond ourselves. Let this ancient wisdom of heroic transformation settle into your heart as you drift towards sleep. Let the courage of Perseus flow through your dreams, reminding you that whatever challenges tomorrow may bring, you have within you the same potential for heroic transformation that turned a fisherman's adopted son into the greatest monster slayer of legend. Rest now, knowing that your fears are not your enemies, but your teachers, that your challenges are not your obstacles, but your opportunities to discover who you were truly meant to become. Sleep the sleep of heroes, and wake with the courage of Perseus.